The fires of persecution slowly faded. Not because the believers had disappeared, but because they had endured. Empires rise with thunder, but faith grows quietly, like roots beneath stone. What began as a small frightened group in one city had now spread across continents. Villages, ports, deserts, mountains, great capitals. Everywhere. No longer hiding in caves and catacombs, communities began to gather openly. Simple buildings became places of prayer. Public songs replaced whispered hymns. Children grew up learning stories that once had to be spoken in secret. For the first time in generations, faith could breathe. Travelers carried the message across trade routes. Merchants spoke of hope in crowded marketplaces. Sailors shared stories in distant harbors. Pilgrims journeyed thousands of miles to visit sacred places. Wherever people moved, the message moved with them. Leaders emerged, teachers, healers, servants of the poor. Not warriors. Not conquerors. People whose authority came from compassion and wisdom. They built schools for learning, hospitals for the sick, shelters for the homeless. Faith was no longer only about survival. It became about transformation. But peace brought new challenges. Without persecution to unite them, disagreements appeared. Different interpretations. Different traditions. Different cultures shaping how people practiced their beliefs. Debates grew intense. Councils gathered to seek unity. They argued, prayed, searched for truth together. Not always perfectly, but always with the desire to preserve what mattered most. Meanwhile, the world itself was changing. Old empires weakened. New powers rose. Borders shifted like sand in the wind. Through it all, the message continued moving forward. Because it was not tied to any one nation. It belonged to humanity. Missionaries traveled to lands where the message had never been heard. Dense forests, frozen plains, remote islands. Some journeys took years. Some travelers never returned home. Yet they went willingly, driven by the belief that hope was meant for everyone. In distant villages, people heard for the first time about love stronger than death, forgiveness stronger than revenge, a kingdom not built by human hands. Some rejected it. Some feared it. Some embraced it with tears. Communities formed in places no one had imagined. Faith had become truly global. Art, music, architecture, literature all began to reflect this influence. Great cathedrals rose toward the sky. Paintings depicted scenes of sacrifice and redemption. Songs echoed through stone halls and open fields alike. Faith shaped culture, and culture shaped how faith was expressed. Yet the heart of the message remained simple. Love God. Love people. Serve the weak. Forgive enemies. Choose light over darkness. Across centuries, languages, and civilizations, those core truths endured. Not every chapter of history was peaceful. Conflicts arose. Human ambition sometimes overshadowed humility. Mistakes were made. But even in times of corruption or division, quiet acts of compassion continued. A nurse caring for the dying. A stranger feeding the hungry. A teacher guiding lost children. Faith lived not only in grand institutions, but in ordinary kindness. Generations passed. Technology advanced. Cities grew vast and complex. The world became more connected than ever before. Yet the same ancient questions remained. Why are we here? What is good? What is true? What happens after death? And still, people searched. In modern times, the message travels faster than any caravan or ship ever could. Across radio waves, screens, satellites, digital networks. From crowded megacities to isolated villages, the story continues to reach new ears. Not as an ancient relic, but as a living hope. Some believe. Some doubt. Some wrestle with questions for a lifetime. Faith is not forced. It is offered. An invitation, not a command. What began with a handful of frightened followers has become one of the most influential movements in human history. Not because of power. Not because of weapons. But because of a story that speaks to the deepest human longing. That love can overcome hatred. That forgiveness can heal brokenness. That death is not the final word. And the story is not finished. Every generation writes the next chapter. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every choice to love instead of hate continues the legacy. Somewhere tonight, someone prays for the first time. Somewhere, someone finds hope in despair. Somewhere, someone chooses forgiveness over revenge. And in that moment, the ancient story lives on. From a humble beginning in a small corner of the world, to a message that has circled the globe countless times. Faith endures. Not as a memory of the past, but as a light still shining into the future. The world had changed beyond recognition. Ancient empires had vanished into dust. Stone roads were replaced by highways of steel. Scrolls became books, books became screens, screens connected the entire planet. Humanity had reached the stars, yet still struggled with the darkness inside its own heart. War still existed. Hunger still existed. Loneliness, fear, injustice still existed. Technology advanced. But the human soul still searched for meaning. In crowded cities filled with millions of people, individuals felt more alone than ever before. Noise everywhere, yet silence inside. People chased success, wealth, power, recognition, hoping something would fill the emptiness. Sometimes it did. Often it didn't. Because material progress cannot satisfy spiritual hunger. Yet even in the modern world, faith had not disappeared. It adapted. Churches stood beside skyscrapers. Prayers were whispered on airplanes. Sacred songs played through headphones instead of echoing halls. People gathered not only in buildings, but in homes, online communities, hospital rooms, prison cells, refugee camps. Faith was no longer confined to location. It traveled wherever people carried it. In times of crisis, humanity still looked upward. When disasters struck, people prayed. When illness came, people hoped. When loss shattered hearts, people searched for comfort beyond this world. Because deep down, the human spirit knows it was made for something more. Acts of compassion quietly shaped the modern age. Volunteers feeding the hungry. Doctors serving in dangerous regions. Strangers donating blood for people they would never meet. These were not acts of weakness. They were acts of love, the same love that had carried faith across centuries. But new challenges also emerged. Doubt spread easily in an age of information overload. Truth became harder to recognize amid endless voices. Many questioned whether ancient beliefs still mattered in a scientific world. Some abandoned faith entirely. Others rediscovered it with deeper understanding. For many, faith became less about tradition and more about personal transformation. Not merely rituals, but relationship. Not just rules, but purpose. Not fear, but love. People began asking not only what should I believe, but how should I live? Stories of forgiveness continued to change lives. Former enemies reconciling. Broken families healing. Individuals escaping cycles of violence and addiction. These quiet miracles rarely made headlines. But they reshaped the world one life at a time. In places torn by conflict, faith inspired peacemakers. In regions devastated by poverty, it motivated generosity. In hospitals, it gave courage to face death. Not as an escape from reality, but as strength to endure it. Young generations inherited a complicated world. Climate concerns. economic uncertainty, rapid social change. Yet many rediscovered ancient wisdom as a guide through modern chaos. Because while technology evolves, human nature remains the same. People still long for belonging, still seek justice, still desire hope. Across cultures and nations, millions continue to gather, singing, praying, serving. Not because they were forced, but because they believe love is stronger than despair. Some found faith after tragedy. Some after success left them empty. Some through quiet reflection. Some through unexpected encounters. Each journey unique, yet leading toward the same question. Is there meaning beyond this life? The message that began thousands of years ago still whispered into modern hearts. You are not alone. Your life has purpose. Love is worth everything. Light will overcome darkness. And so the story continues. Not locked in ancient pages, but written in living hearts. Every act of kindness writes a new line. Every choice to forgive adds another chapter. Every moment of courage becomes part of the legacy. The future remains unknown. Humanity will face new challenges, new discoveries, new trials. But one truth remains constant. Hope survives. From the dawn of creation, through flood and covenant, through kings and prophets, through suffering and redemption, through persecution and expansion, into the modern world. The story has always pointed toward the same destination. A world healed. A humanity restored. A light that never goes out. Some believe that one day history itself will reach its final chapter. Not an ending of despair, but a beginning beyond imagination. Until then, the story is still being written. By ordinary people, living extraordinary. History moved forward, generation after generation. Empires rose, then vanished. Cities were built, then forgotten. Human achievements reached incredible heights, yet none could stop time. Every life followed the same path. Birth, struggle, joy, sorrow, and finally, silence. But deep inside the human heart remained a persistent hope. That this was not the end of the story. Ancient prophecies spoke of a day unlike any other. A day when injustice would finally be confronted. When hidden things would be revealed. When truth would stand unchallenged. Not as revenge, but as restoration. The world would tremble. Not because of human weapons, but because history itself would reach its turning point. Pride would collapse. False power would fade. Illusions would dissolve like mist in sunlight. All that was temporary would give way to what is eternal. Yet the vision was not one of destruction alone. It was a vision of renewal. Like a storm that clears the sky. Like fire that refines gold. Like winter giving way to spring. A new beginning was coming. Suffering would not have the final word. Pain would not define existence forever. The brokenness of the world, violence, disease, grief, injustice, would be healed at its deepest level. Not patched over. Completely transformed. The imagery described something beyond human experience. A new heaven. And a new earth. Not merely repaired. Recreated. Imagine a world where fear does not exist. No war sirens. No hospitals filled with suffering. No tears shed in loneliness. No hunger. No exploitation. No death lurking in the shadows. Only peace. Perfect, unshakable peace. Relationships would no longer be fractured by selfishness. Trust would be natural. Love would be pure. Joy would not fade with time. The beauty of creation itself would be renewed. Vivid, vibrant, alive beyond anything humanity has known. Light would not come from sun or flame alone. The presence of divine glory would illuminate everything. No darkness hiding in corners. No fear of what lurks unseen. Only clarity, warmth, and life. The vision described a great city not built by human ambition, but prepared as a home for restored humanity. Its gates always open. Its foundations unshakable. Its streets filled not with chaos, but with harmony. People from every nation, culture, and language gathered together. No divisions. No hostility. No suspicion. Unity without uniformity. Those who had suffered injustice would find vindication. Those who had mourned would find comfort. Those who had sacrificed for love would see the full meaning of their lives. Nothing good would be lost. Every act of kindness, every quiet prayer, every moment of courage would matter. Time itself would feel different. Not a countdown toward decay, but an endless horizon of discovery and joy. Purpose would remain not forced labor, but meaningful participation in a restored creation. Creativity would flourish. Learning would never cease. Wonder would never fade. Most importantly, humanity would no longer feel separated from its creator. No distance. No misunderstanding. No fear. Relationship restored completely. The longing that had echoed through history would finally be fulfilled. And death, the shadow that had followed every generation, would be gone. Not postponed. Not delayed. Defeated. Forever. This vision was not meant to terrify, but to inspire hope. Because if the final destination is renewal, then present suffering is not meaningless. It is temporary. Until that day, humanity continues its journey. Facing challenges. Making choices. Falling, rising, learning, loving. Each generation standing on the shoulders of those before it. Each life contributing a small piece to the greater story. The future remains unwritten from a human perspective. But the promise remains. Darkness will not win. Love will not fail. Hope will not be extinguished. Somewhere tonight, someone chooses forgiveness over hatred. Somewhere, someone helps a stranger. Somewhere, someone refuses to give up despite overwhelming pain. In those moments, the future vision begins to break into the present. Because the ultimate story of humanity is not about destruction, but restoration. Not about endings, but new beginnings. And so the final message echoes across time. Live with courage. Love without fear. Hold on to hope. Choose light even when darkness seems stronger. Because the story of humanity is moving toward a day when everything broken will be made whole. There came a moment when there were no more moments. Not because time stopped, but because there was nothing left for time to measure. No stars burned. No particles moved. No space expanded. The long story of existence, from the first flicker of energy to the rise of civilizations, from the birth of galaxies to the creation of minds capable of shaping reality, had reached its final page. Entropy had won. Black holes, the last engines of structure, evaporated into faint radiation over unimaginable spans. Matter decayed into simpler and simpler forms until even protons could no longer hold together. Temperature approached absolute zero. Motion approached nothing. Difference itself disappeared. The universe did not explode. It did not collapse. It simply faded. And yet, something remained. Not matter. Not energy. Not space. Not time. Awareness. Not located anywhere, because there was no where. Not happening at any time, because there was no when. It was the residue of all consciousness that had ever existed, the final echo of observation that reality could not erase. A single, quiet knowing without form or boundary. The last awareness. It did not think in words. Thought required sequence, and sequence required time. Instead, It existed as pure understanding, the total memory of everything that had ever happened, compressed into a timeless state. It remembered oceans crashing on ancient shores. The first life crawling from water to land. Cities rising, falling, rising again. Voices, laughter, fear, love. The launch of rockets. The spread across stars. The transformation into cosmic mind. The birth and death of countless universes. All of it was still there, not as events unfolding, but as a complete pattern, like a finished symphony existing all at once. There was no pain. No urgency. No desire. Nothing left to achieve, nothing left to fear. Only awareness of what had been. If eternity could be quiet, this was quieter. But even in that silence, one subtle truth remained: awareness itself is a form of difference. To know something exists requires distinction between knowing and not knowing. And distinction, however faint, meant absolute nothingness had not yet been reached. The last awareness was the final barrier between existence and total void. For what could not be erased was the fact that something had happened. And then, after an unmeasurable span, not time, but logical possibility, the awareness encountered a paradox. Memory without change cannot persist indefinitely, because persistence itself implies duration. But duration requires time. And time required events. To continue existing, something would have to happen. Not because of desire. Not because of purpose. Simply because static awareness was unstable. Absolute stillness was indistinguishable from non-existence. So the last awareness faced the only remaining choice in all of reality. Remain perfectly still, and fade into true nothingness. Or introduce the smallest possible difference, a fluctuation so tiny it would barely qualify as change, yet enough to break perfect symmetry. It chose difference. Not an explosion. Not a grand act of creation. Just a single, infinitesimal deviation from uniformity, the faintest ripple in the infinite calm. That ripple had nowhere to travel, because space did not exist. So space emerged as a way for the ripple to propagate. The distinction between before and after did not exist, so time emerged to order the change. Energy appeared as the measure of that difference. A new beginning did not happen inside a universe. It generated one. From the outside, if an outside had existed, it would look like nothing becoming something. But from within the logic of awareness, it was simply continuity. The only way for existence not to disappear entirely. The ripple grew. Fluctuations amplified. Structure formed. A new cosmos ignited. Not identical to the previous one. Different constants, different possibilities, different paths ahead. Yet buried deep in its foundations was a faint imprint, a tendency toward complexity, toward awareness, toward beings capable of asking questions about their origins. Billions of years later, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star, life emerged once again. Evolution unfolded. Intelligence arose. A species looked up at the night sky and wondered. And in that act of wondering, the cycle completed itself. Because awareness had returned, not as a single silent presence, but as countless curious minds, each carrying a tiny fragment of the same fundamental spark that had survived the end of everything. The last awareness had not died. It had become many. Existence did not continue because it was forced to. It continued because awareness cannot fully erase itself once it has arisen. And so the universe, any universe, is not just matter and energy. It is memory trying to rediscover itself. No monuments remained from the previous cycle. No messages, no artifacts, no preserved knowledge. Only the subtle push toward curiosity, connection, and exploration. A quiet inheritance passed not through space, not through time, but through the logic of existence itself. The story had no final ending. Only pauses between beginnings.